Happy Valentine's Month, everybody, and Tony here with my review of Strauss's Elektra with conductor Simone Young, which I saw at the Staatsoper unter den Linden. This marks the fourth overall time that I caught Patrice Chéreau's production of Strauss's Elektra at the Staatsoper unter den Linden, considering that the first time I caught his production of Elektra was 8 years ago at the Staatsoper im Stille Theater, because I wanted to see, hear, and witness Evelyn Herlitzius perform the role of Klytämnestra, as I also saw her 8 years ago perform Elektra at the Staatsoper im Stille Theater. But before I assess her performance as Klytämnestra, a few shoutouts have to go to Hubert Hanaud, who is one of my dear online Facebook friends, as well as Philip, or Philip of the Opera, from Instagram. Hubert was really a very fascinating person that I've been engaging with on Facebook, considering our shared interests in opera and considering the great deal of conversations that we've been having. So to see him in person was a major surprise that I did not expect to happen. He introduced himself to me, and at first I was a little bit confused, but once I started to put two and two together, that's when it all started to make sense. And it was such a joy, let alone a surprise, to meet Hubert live and in the flesh. So Hubert, if you're watching this video, I'm absolutely grateful and surprised and just totally overjoyed to have met you in person. I was just left speechless to the point where I was thinking to myself that this was a pleasant surprise. It was such a wonderful time just meeting up with you, as well as just having a nice little conversation before I went home to record this review of Strauss's Elektra. So I also hope that you have a nice week here in Berlin. I also hope that you have a lot of wonderful operatic and musical memories here. And here's also hoping that we continue staying in touch, whether online or in person. As for Philip, or Philip of the Opera on Instagram, I've always found his posts on a lot of opera productions absolutely insightful and absolutely engaging. I've also enjoyed a lot of his content on Instagram, and I've also found him to be a very down-to-earth and absolutely interesting and amazing person. So Philip, if you're watching this video, I also hope that you enjoy my review, let alone assessment, of Evelyn Herlitzius' performance as Klytämnestra. With that said, let's get on to the main program, starting off with Evelyn Herlitzius as Klytämnestra. I've always admired Evelyn Herlitzius as a singing actress, and I've always argued that she does take after Dame Gwyneth Jones in terms of not only her voice, interesting temperament that it has, as well as how much abandon both Gwyneth Jones and Evelyn Herlitzius possessed when it came to just blasting top notes, as well as just letting their voices out with full abandon, but also her intense and thoroughly dedicated acting skills. There was a lot that I continued to admire about Evelyn Herlitzius as a singing actress, and her performance as Klytämnestra was absolutely no exception. Much like her predecessors, including Astrid Varnay and Danica Mastilovic, and if you want to do a reverse example, being Gertrud Rönger, who started out as Klytämnestra, but was also renowned for singing Elektra, Evelyn Herlitzius was also on that similar trajectory. And there was no doubt that I did admire her performance as Elektra because of how much she was able to launch at those top notes, as well as her penchant for her choreography, especially where her death dance was concerned. And now witnessing her as Klytämnestra, I'm still floored by her acting skills, as well as her overall flair for drama. When watching her on stage, she kind of reminds me of an amalgamation of Gloria Swanson, Norma Desmond, and Bette Davis. This is especially where Bette Davis is concerned in terms of her portrayal as Baby Jane Hudson from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, let alone a lot of the grands guignols or psycho biddies from the 1960s to the 1970s, ranging from not only Betty Davis, but also Joan Crawford. That is just how much Evelyn Herlitzius reminded me of those old school actresses in that particular horror genre. The way she was able to embody Klytämnestra with a lot of guilt, pomp, and a whole deal of angst just made her thoroughly engaging as a singing actress. And she also did the haughty laughter when she finds out that Orest is supposedly dead, which is completely different to how Waltraud Mayer's Klytämnestra reacted in the same production, in which she was left in total shock and in tears, let alone in absolute doleful sadness. Here, Evelyn Herlitzius was haughty in her portrayal as Klytämnestra when she finds out about the supposed news, but she didn't go too over-the-top malicious, let alone malevolent, as Astrid Varnay accomplished in the 1981 Götz Friedrich film. This is also to suggest that Herlitzius' Klytämnestra is basically stating that, yes, she is justified in what she has done, and she is not afraid to admit that this is also to protect herself, as well as show that Agamemnon was not really the hero that Elektra idealized, but someone who chose to have a concubine with him, let alone sacrifice her eldest daughter Iphigenia to the gods just so that they can win in a war, and on top of that, trying to escape a very loveless marriage with this warrior. Therefore, Evelyn Herlitzius' characterization of Klytämnestra combines what is found in the Hugo von Hofmannsthal text, as well as Strauss's adaptation of Hofmannsthal's text, as well as the Greek dramas from Euripides and Sophocles, thus making the best of both worlds, putting in the manic as well as the regal. And speaking of manic, that is just what Evelyn Herlitzius managed to accomplish as Klytämnestra. Her manic nervousness, her anguish, her angst, and her overall want for ensuring that she maintains pomp as a suit of armor were all there at the palms of her hands, all the way up to the sleeves on her clothes. She was still able to maintain that sense of regality, as well as that queenliness and that royal nature about her, while combining that with a lot of haughtiness, as well as the guilt-ridden nature that has defined Hugo von Hofmannsthal's Klytämnestra, as well as what she has to go through with all of her nightmares, her angst, and her sheer terror of what is to come with her, as well as the impending prophecy that Orest might come to kill not only her, but also her lover, Aegisth. These are all the assets that have made Evelyn Herlitzius work theatrically as Klytämnestra. Vocally, she was still able to give the goods in terms of showing a lot of vocal acting. While I can argue that Evelyn Herlitzius is not renowned for technical security, let alone ensuring such a clean, polished tone, let alone having a great deal of balance in her voice, she's at least a capable singing actress who can act with her voice as well as let it ring throughout the theater with full abandon. And her top notes were still there and intact. Sure, her middle notes did kind of suffer. And sure, some of her chest tones did show some signs of inconsistencies. Sometimes she had them. Sometimes she could let them ring with full abandon. But there were times that her chest tones did kind of sound hollow on certain occasions, thus illustrating some of the vocal inconsistencies present in Evelyn Herlitzius, let alone omnipresent with her throughout her career. And if you know me, I've always preferred a contralto singing Klytämnestra. Voices such as Karin Brandsell, Kerstin Torborg, Lydia Kinderman, Res Fischer, Margareta Klose, Gustav Hammer, and Elisabeth Hüngen were definitely the real deals when it came to Klytämnestra's chest tones, cavernous chest tones, and real dark voices that have made their performances of Klytämnestra all the more iconic. This is especially true when it comes to voices such as Karin Brandsell, Lydia Kinderman, Kerstin Torborg, Res Fischer, and Margareta Klose, whose dark, round, cavernous, and almost baritonal-like low notes were absolutely exceptional assets as Klytämnestra. I also dare not forget about singers who specialized in both mezzo-soprano and contralto roles, such as Jean Madeira, who I also argue is a natural contralto, and Regina Resnick, who might have started out as a soprano until 1953, but through Giuseppe Danise found her true calling in a lot of the mezzo-soprano and contralto roles. No doubt were Jean Madeira and Regina Resnick absolutely exceptional as Klytämnestra. And if we're talking about former Brunhildes specializing in Klytämnestra, I dare not forget about Anna von Mildenburg, Gertrud Rünger, Martha Mödel, and especially Astrid Varnay, because it also says a lot when Astrid Varnay had those dark, rich, cavernous, baritonal-like, and manly-like chest tones that could make any contralto green with envy because of just how beautifully and strongly and mightily she coordinates those chest tones, especially in Klytämnestra's angsty moments and her moments of just feeling so drained by all of this guilt, but also demanding a lot more blood as well as sacrifices to ensure that her nightmares are abased. And who could ever forget about Helga Dernesch, who was also renowned in not just mezzo-soprano roles, but also started out as a dramatic soprano before finding her true calling in the 1980s, let alone in the late 1970s, as a mezzo-soprano. Her Klytämnestra was quite iconic because she was able to combine gorgeousness with a lot of heft in the lower to middle register, thus making her absolutely iconic in this role. What about Reinhild Runkel? She was also iconic in this role because of those chest tones, as well as using those chest tones to make a great deal of angst and anguish in this particular queen. And some of the more modern singers like Jane Henschel also took advantage of those deep, dark, and cavernous chest tones. With Evelyn Herlitzius, on the other hand, she did show some signs of consistency with her overall vocal acting, but there were times that her chest tone emissions were kind of intermittent. There were times she had them, there were times she didn't, there were times that she coordinated some of them, there were times that she didn't coordinate some of them. It was just an overall inconsistent mess vocally, but I'm forgiving enough to overlook that because at least Evelyn Herlitzius' overall theatrical flair and her overall dedication to her craft as a singing actress could never ever be taken for granted, let alone be denied. So while I do want a lot more darkness, richness, cavernousness, and baritonal, like, let alone bass, like, low notes in any contralto singing Klytämnestra, I'm still willing to salute Evelyn Herlitzius' overall dedication to her craft for mastering Klytämnestra. She's basically known the psyches of both Elektra and Klytämnestra, thus making her be at such a nice edge above any other singing actress singing both Elektra and Klytämnestra, as well as understanding both characters with everything she's got. It would have also been a dream to have heard her sing the monologue uncut before Elektra launches at her monologue Was bluten muss, before Klytämnestra ends up realizing that Orest is supposedly dead. That would have been very interesting because I did hear Waltraud Meyer perform the monologue uncut before Elektra launches at her Was bluten muss rage onto her. But at least the main takeaway from Evelyn Herlitzius' performance as Klytämnestra is that she continues to show a lot of dedication, a lot of confidence, aplomb, chutzpah, and a great deal of charisma that were her amazing assets. Sometimes her voice did show a lot of inconsistencies. There were times that the inconsistencies did kind of mar her vocal portrayal of this role, as well as her overall vocal technique, but at least she was still an engaging singing actress who managed to make the best out of her voice, as well as her overall vocal resources, to make the role of Klytämnestra her own, and own it she did with full aplomb, full confidence, full regality, and a lot of major dedication. Cheryl Studer also continued to make the best out of her voice as the overseer. She continued to be confident and show a whole lot of aplomb as this character part, even to the point where she was not afraid to launch at some top notes that continued to demonstrate how gutsy and determined she continued to be as a singing actress. Vida Magnievich-Schulte actually grew in a lot more vocal consistency as Chrysothemis. I've been getting a lot more used to her vocal performance as Chrysothemis because I have learned to appreciate just how much her silvery, silky, and piercing lyric soprano / borderline spinto soprano voice managed to just glow, radiate, and show a whole lot of translucent luminescence from bottom to top. She was able to let her voice just ring throughout the theater with so much beauty, so much incandescence, as if pearls, jewels, and precious treasures were falling right out of her mouth. A crystalline voice that continues to be so beautiful from beginning to end, from bottom to top, and she just launched at those top notes with pure abandon. When listening to Vida Magnievich-Schulte's Chrysothemis a lot more closely, she sounds like an amalgamation of Lisa della Casa, especially where her silvery emission is concerned, and Grebe Rubenstein, considering that fullness that she also had as a natural spinto soprano with full lyric soprano undertones. And I dare not forget about that piercing quality that defined the very young Leonie Rysanek back in the 1950s, let alone in the late 1940s, when she started to be in her prime as a singing actress, especially since Chrysothemis is one of her most famous roles of all time. That tight vibrato as well as that youthful silvery quality were all present in Vida Magnievich-Schulte as Chrysothemis. While I still do prefer darker, richer, fuller, and meatier voices as Chrysothemis, such as the ones found in Wanda Axel Clemens, Walburga Wegner, Hildegard Hillebrecht, Leonie Rysanek, especially when she started to come into her own, not only in the 1950s, but also in the 1960s, 1970s, and 1980s, Ingrid Bjorner, Marion Lippert, and Elizabeth Connell, and I dare not forget about Hedwig Müller-Bütow and Marianne Schech, as well as Frances Yiend, because these were dramatic sopranos that had round, rich, cavernous, and really great chest tones, coupled with some meatier voices that made their performances as Chrysothemis shine. And I dare not forget about Gladys Kuchta, who was a little bit more well known as Elektra, but also did Chrysothemis in the 1950s. But regardless, Vida Magnievich-Schulte continued to show great musicianship, as well as an incandescent tone that made her voice luminous and absolutely gorgeous from bottom to top. I still encourage her to really take advantage of her chest tones so that her voice can continue to grow in a lot more richness, depth, and a lot more dimension, as well as be well preserved for many years to come. But when all is said and done, I still salute Vida Meknevich-Schulte for such an excellent performance as Chrysothemis. Irene Theorin was still really good as Elektra, theatrically at least, and her top notes were still as incandescent as ever as she managed to make those her greatest assets. Whether she launched at her top A's or top B flats or top B's or top C's, she was thoroughly wobble-free, let alone unbeatable with those top notes. She was still able to launch at them with full abandon and a whole lot of confidence, self-assuredness, and a whole lot of chutzpah. Yes, they may not be more dimensional, let alone a lot more lightning and thunder-like, like let's say Gertrud Grob-Prandtl, Birgit Nilsson, and Gwyneth Jones, especially where both Gertrud Grob-Prandtl and Birgit Nilsson are concerned. But at least Irene Theorin was absolutely charismatic in her own special way as a singing actress. While I still enjoy her vocal prowess as well as her theatrical skills, there were occasions in which she did master very limited gestures, such as her constant finger pointing, as well as spamming that finger pointing motion, but at least she was still very involving and very engaging as a singing actress. Her surprise and absolute joy and ecstasy of seeing Orest, who she thought he was dead, was just absolutely riveting, and her overall flair for drama remains thoroughly unparalleled. While I could send all the laurels I continue to have for Irene Theorin as Elektra, her vocal resources have been working against her favor. I know that part of it is just age working against her because she's currently in her 60s, but when you have someone like Birgit Nilsson and Hildegard Behrens continuously showing a lot of musicianship, especially when their top notes and chest tones were concerned, then that doesn't really excuse the overall quality present in Irene Theorin's voice these days. It also says a lot that her chest tones, her coordinated chest tones, and her head voice sounded really inconsistent when she sang the role of Elektra through and through. There were times that she did have some chest tones. There were times that she didn't have chest tones. There were times that she coordinated her chest tones. There were other times that she did not coordinate her chest tones, thus showing a lot of inconsistencies going on with Irene Theorin's vocal performance as Elektra. I must strongly emphasize that there were actually complete packages as Elektra, those found in Birgit Nilsson, considering her coordinated chest tones when she sang the role in its entirety, and when you want real chest tones from a real dramatic soprano, you dare not go further than Liana Zunnek, as she has also been extremely well known as Elektra, and in fact, I've always loved Liana Zunnek a lot more as Elektra than as Chrysothemis. And if we're talking about other high note blasters who had a lot more metal, richness, and therefore depth in their voices, then I dare not neglect Liselotte Tomemüller, whose overall vocal prowess and coordinated chest tones and complete technique made her absolutely win as Elektra. Let's also not forget about the darker voices found in Annie Konecny, Helena Braun, Erna Schlüter, Helene Wildbrunn, Gertrud Rönger, Gerda Lamas, Astrid Varnay, Ingrid Steger, Sigrid Kiel, Janice Martin, and Isolde Eichler, because they also had chest tones that could rival any mezzo-soprano or contralto, as well as those blazing top notes. And while I did enjoy Irene Theorin's top notes, they could not hold a candle to the likes of Gertrud Grob-Prandtl, Birgit Nilsson, Danica Mastilovic, and my personal favorite, Gwyneth Jones, because of how much they rang throughout the theater, as well as showed a lot of security from bottom to, of course, top. However, when all is said and done, at least Irene Theoren was still a consummate singing actress whose vocal resources might have been hit or miss these days, but at least her performance as Elektra was really riveting and thoroughly engaging. I should know because I also saw her in the same role 7 years ago at the Kungliga Operan in Stockholm when she performed this role alongside Cornelia Besko as Chrysothemis and Katarina Dalaiman as Klytämnestra. There she was a lot more vocally secure, at least it sounded more vocally secure 7 years ago. But these days, the vocal insecurities and vocal inconsistencies kind of did mar her overall vocal performance as Elektra, but at least she was still a fascinating and thoroughly engaging singing actress who made the best of not only her voice, but also her overall prowess as a singing actress, specializing in this monumental and very much challenging role, which she also did for nearly over a decade, let alone over a decade and a half. So I still have to give props to Irene Theorin for such a committed portrayal as Elektra. Klara Nadezhdin's performance as the fourth maid was thoroughly riveting, taking great advantage of her chest tones, coordinated chest tones, and top notes to bring in such a multi-dimensional portrayal of the fourth maid, and she also continued to grow in sterling technique, all thanks to that silvery lyric soprano voice that just radiated throughout the theater. And I do encourage her to keep on developing her chest tones as well as take great inspiration from the likes of Marie Collier in terms of vocal fullness, as well as a lot of the great interpreters of the fourth maid of the past, such as Judith Hellwig and even Ilona Steingruber, just to name a few. And Roberta Alexander as the fifth maid was also riveting. Her technical prowess was at its absolute prime and beauty, and she still continues to demonstrate absolutely amazing musicianship. So brava to Roberta Alexander. Bonita Hyman's contralto voice was thoroughly chesty, juicy, and imposing as ever as the first maid. Natalia Skritska's creamy, luscious, deep, and sufficiently gorgeous mezzo-soprano voice served the second maid so beautifully. And Anna Kisjudit's performance as the third maid was absolutely riveting. Her chest tones were strong, meaty, and powerful. She had great presence, and she had this absolute charisma about her, not only vocally, but also theatrically. And I also do hope that she continues to grow from strength to strength, thus also showing that all singers of the five maids were absolutely brilliant in their own special ways. Olaf Bear may not be a deep, dark, round, rich, and cavernous basso profondo, but at least as a baritone, he was able to make a great deal out of the old servant's two lines. Although if you ask me, I've always preferred to hear a darker, richer, rounder, more cavernous, and more menacing sounding basso profondo as the old servant, akin to Kurt Böhme being one of my all-time favorites. But I digress. At least Olaf Bear continued to exhibit some great vocal acting, as well as ensuring that his stage presence remained as fine and sturdy as ever. David Wakeham was a resonant, virile, and imposing old tutor, all thanks to his bass baritone voice being absolutely pleasing to the ear, as well as showing that he can cover his notes so exceptionally well. Stefan Rügamer's August did continue to leave a lot to be desired, because I'll always say this over and over again, that my preference for August is always a Heldentenor. Voices such as Bernd Aldenhoff, Max Lorenz, Seth Svanholm, Hans Beurer, Ramon Vinay, and James King are always gonna be the type of tenors I'm gonna consult when it comes to Aegis, because they had real beefy, muscular, bicep-flexing Heldentenor voices that made their performances as Aegis work so well, because he's a king, despite him not being a great king. With Stefan Rügema, yes, his vocal acting is still so convincing as this thoroughly unpleasant character, but I'm missing the extra beefiness. I'm missing the extra muscularity of a true Heldentenor, and I'm missing that extra virility that I've always loved in many Heldentenors singing Aegis. Here, at least he was still a fine vocal actor, although his voice is not one that I would easily recommend as Aegis. Lauri Vassar also continued to be an absolutely dashing and thoroughly consummate singing actor as Orest. His bass baritone / dramatic baritone voice managed to be so convincing. He was still an absolutely charismatic singing actor using that fine and focused bass baritone voice of his to his advantage. Yes, you could argue that it did lack a little bit more in additional depth, such as the ones found in Ferdinand Franz, or my personal favorite Orest, Hans Hotte, and I dare not forget about Paul Schöffler. But at least Lauri Vassar had a lot of vocal presence and a lot of charisma to make Orest work so well in his favor. And Siyabonga Makungo's vocal prowess as the young servant grew in exceptional prodigiousness, considering how he was able to cover a great deal of his notes as well as show a lot more charisma, flair, and beauty. It seems that the initial issue that I used to have with Siyabonga Makungo's slight nasality is dissipating, and I hope that he continues to develop a lot more pharyngally so that his voice can truly ring with awesome beauty and covered chest tones, as well as ensuring that he sings in coperto, as well as develop a lot more virility in his light lyric tenor voice. I also have to give a whole lot of kudos to Luisa Hagediza Bernburg, Anna Ernst, Lea Lechler, Patricia Rissmann, Bruno Sando, and Jana Schlender for their absolutely riveting portrayals as the palace servants, as well as the other palace servants found in Verena Allertz, Minju von Blomberg, Olga Wilenskaya, Konstanze Löwe, Stephanie Zafransky, and Anne Volt. So overall, this singing was really engaging all the way through. I still have to give a lot of kudos to Evelyn Herlitzius for such a thoroughly interesting and absolutely engaging performance as Klytämnestra. While she may not be the chestiest, deepest, darkest, roundest, and most cavernous interpreter of Klytämnestra, because I've always been partial to contralto singing Klytämnestra, I still have to give major props to Evelyn Herlitzius and her overall dedication as a singing actress. She was able to sell it so convincingly as Klytämnestra that whatever vocal issues I spotted with Evelyn Herlitzius as Klytämnestra were pretty much dissipated every time she was on stage, as well as showed me that she can continue to work it so effectively as a singing actress. She did win in her own special way, and I still salute her for what she was able to do characteristically as this queen. Her vocal resources may not always be at her favor, but what she could do with it was just still outstanding as well as thoroughly engaging. I still also have to give some props to Irina Theorin for a continuously engaging as well as dedicated effort in making Elektra come to life. Sure, there were times that her vocal inconsistencies, like her inconsistent chest tones, inconsistent coordinated chest tones, and I dare not forget about some of the places where she did sing in legato, but the legato lines kind of got chopped up to bits in certain areas, probably to also show a lot more of Elektra's fragmented state. But at least with those vocal faults, some of them can be forgiven, but some of them cannot be overlooked, because when it comes to the thorough package, I felt like Irina Theorin did kind of fall short as to what she really needed to ensure that her voice remained stable, as well as continued to really have that foundation from bottom to top. At least, in spite of her flaws, she was still an engaging singing actress, and she was still a thoroughly interesting and pretty fun singing actress to witness on stage. And also kudos has to go to Evelyn Herlitzius for her blood-curdling screams. They may not be on the level of Regina Resnick or to some extent a lot of the older Klytämnestras, and even Christa Ludwig for that matter, but at least Evelyn Herlitzius continued to sell it so well. And when it comes to the overall sterling quality of singing, Vida Miknevičiūtė was the gold medal standard. Sure, I still continue to encourage her to develop her chest tones a lot more, let alone take more advantage of her chest tones, but she is still a thoroughly engaging singer who had such an awesomely beautiful instrument that just rang throughout the theater with every single fiber of her being. I also still have to give a lot of kudos to Stefan Rugama, Lauri Vasar, David Wakeham, Cheryl Studer, Natalia Skritska, Siabonga Makungo, Olaf Beer, Bonita Hyman, Anja Kisjudit, Klara Nadeshtin, and Roberta Alexander for equally strong efforts, especially where Bonita Hyman, Klara Nadeshtin, and Roberta Alexander are concerned because of their sterling vocal prowess. And I dare not forget about David Wakeham and his overall resonance in his virility and manliness in his bass baritone voice. And Siabonga Makungo for surprising me in the best way possible. All of these singers managed to demonstrate a lot of great effort as performers, and I salute each and every one of them for providing something special to their characters. The conducting done by Simone Young was thoroughly nuanced, absolutely amazing, majestic, and showed a lot of flair, passion, and beauty. There was a lot to love about Simone Young's conducting of Elektra. She was thoroughly conscientious of the text, and she knew when to be intense. She knew when to be drawn back. She knew when to let it all out. She knew when to show some nuance. She had everything and more under the sun when it came to her conducting of Elektra. Therefore, I salute her for whipping up that orchestra into great shape. And of course, the chorus and the orchestra, the Staatsoper unter den Linden, were absolutely brilliant, all thanks to what Simone Young accomplished. Evelyn Herlitzius was quite fascinating as Klytämnestra in terms of her continuously amazing and prodigious skills as a singing actress. While I do prefer darker, deeper, richer, and more cavernous voices as Klytämnestra, I still have to salute Evelyn Herlitzius for really carrying the evening so well as this tragic yet very guilt-ridden queen. Her acting prowess continued to be thoroughly involving, and I still have to give her a lot of praise and kudos for what she was able to accomplish as Queen Klytämnestra, all thanks to her understanding of the character, as well as combining her previous experience as Elektra to make it such a huge benefit in embodying Queen Klytämnestra. She carried the evening with all that she's got as a singing actress, and she also deserves a lot of salutes for what she was able to deliver. But when it comes to the overall vocal quality among the women, Vida Magnevichuta sold it so well as she consistently did. As for the men, David Wakeham was yet another trooper who managed to sell it so handsomely in the small yet very imperative role of the tutor. While I still feel that Irene Teorin should have used a lot more consistency in her coordinated chest tones, at least she was still an engaging singing actress. And the minor roles, especially where Bonita Hyman, Natalia Skritska, Anneke Judith, Clara Deshtin, and Roberta Alexander, and I dare not forget about Cheryl Studer, were absolutely brilliant, and especially where Siabonga Makungo's vocal growth was in full evidence. And for those of you who caught this performance of Strauss's Elektra at the Staatsoper unter den Linden, what'd you think of it? Did you feel that Evelyn Herlitzius was really stirring as Klytämnestra? Did you feel that she really knew and understood the characters so amazingly? What was your most favorite moment with Evelyn Herlitzius as Klytämnestra? Did you also feel that there was another singer who stole the show from her feet, whether it be Irena Teorin as Elektra or Vida Magnevichuta as Chrysothemis? Or did you feel like Evelyn Herlitzius' performance as Klytämnestra was not really to your liking? Please let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for my review of Strauss's Elektra at the Staatsoper unter den Linden starring Evelyn Herlitzius as Klytämnestra. Tune in tomorrow for my review of Strauss's Die Frau ohne Schatten at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. So until then, happy Valentine's month, everybody!